Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. Yes, it's another reading vlog where I'm starting at the end of the day and have wet hair because I've just showered. It's a Saturday. I've spent all day with family. My parents have been redoing their backyard, and so my sister and my brother-in-law were over to help move things around, and I was there as designated toddler wrangler, so I was following my niece around quite a bit. She is about 19 months old now, so it involved basically me ending up covered in frozen yogurt, water, dirt, you name it, toddler things, right? So when I got home, I had to shower because we got messy. But I wanted to start off my vlog for reading some of the oldest review titles that I have sitting on my TBR. Some of these, in fact, one of the books on here is the oldest physical book on my TBR. And I will say there is one recent review copy arc that I have from NetGalley that comes out this year that I will include in this list, just because I'm reading through some review copies and arcs, so it felt fitting to include it. Most of the others have been around for a while and I haven't read them. So this is my motivation. So this is my physical stack. Some of these books made their way onto my TBR for March anyway because of Roll of Reads, which was very, very helpful, and the others I'm just including because they need to get read. And the fifth book, which I'll introduce these ones in a moment, but the fifth book that I have out from NetGalley is Red Dust Running by Dr. Anita Heiss, and I think will actually fit this colour scheme, which is very red and purpley-ish. So the books that I have for review, aside from Red Dust Running, the first one is How to Charm a Nerd by Katherine, Garbera, which is a review copy that I received from HarperCollins, and this is from the Afterglow imprint. I did request this and I just have not gotten to it, and I feel really bad about that, so we're going to read it. The rest of the books have come from Allen and Unwin, and there is a non-fiction and 2 young adult books on here. This is a romance. Red Dust Running is also a contemporary romance, I believe, and Reaching Through Time is a memoir, and it is by Shauna Bostok. This is one that I tried in a try chapter video last year, and I was really intrigued by it. I was sent it for review. It was an unsolicited review copy from Allen and Unwin couple of years ago. I have to be in the right mood to read memoirs, and most of the time I listen to them on audio, and this doesn't have an audio, at least it didn't the last time I checked. So this is my goal, to get to it, to read it, because I did really love the opening section of it when I read it for my try chapter, and I am really intrigued because it explores Shauna Bostok's exploration of her family history and culture. She is an Indigenous woman, and it's her piecing together bits and pieces about her family history, including finding out that some of her white ancestors were slave traders. I think it's going to be a really, really insightful read. And then there are my 2 young adult books. So these I received last year. Please tell me it was last year. Yes, good. It was last year, around October. There is My Family and Other Suspects by Kate Emery, which is a young adult murder mystery. I've never read Kate Emery. I did not request this one, so it was an unsolicited one, which is kind of why it kept getting put off, because I always prioritize the ones that I request because, you know, I need to do that. So I feel really bad about How to Charm a Nerd. But I am intrigued to try this because it has been a hot minute since I read a YA mystery, and I do actually have another one that I purchased that I need to get to because it completes a series. But we're gonna start here just to get myself back into it. And then there is Isobelle Carmody's Comes the Night, which is a YA fantasy. And I will say that I have started this and I tentatively DNF'd it / put it down. But I couldn't get rid of it because Isobelle Carmody is such an institution in terms of Australian fantasy writers that I couldn't get rid of it without giving it another go. So we are going to give it another go in this video. So what am I going to start with? Honestly, it's been a day. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I want to try and get done tonight. So I think I'm going to start with My Family and Other Suspects, just because I think I will probably read it quicker, which, is that even a proper sentence? Gosh, language, what even is that? I would really like a quick read tonight, just because I've got some things that I want to do and I still have to have dinner. So I shall update you when I have some thoughts on My Family and Other Suspects. All right, everyone, so I am back. I have finished reading My Family and Other Suspects by Kate Emery. This is a YA mystery, and we are in the perspective of Ruth. Ruth is staying at her step-grandmother's farm with her dad, her aunt, her half-aunt, and her partner, and her half-cousin, I think. That's how it all goes. And sorry, her other aunt also has a partner, Nick, who spends most of the time in the hospital because at the start of the book we think he's been bitten by a brown snake. But Nick is just kind of that character in the background who is always in trouble and never makes an appearance. So the family have all been staying at the farm, and then after this alleged snakebite incident. They have one night, everyone's planning on leaving in the next couple of days, but they end up staying one more night. And the next morning, Ruth's step-grandmother, Gigi, is dead. And the cause of death is a typewriter that has fallen on her head. Ruth is very much an amateur detective. She loves all of that kind of stuff. She loves Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes and all of that. Dylan, who is her half-cousin, is also kind of keen on all of those things, and they have previously been known to investigate things together. And kind of the side plot is that they didn't find out that they were half-cousins until fairly recently, and before that Ruth had been attracted to him. So one thing I will say is that Ruth is 14 and Dylan is 16, so they're actually on the younger end of the YA spectrum, so consider that with a book. That's the thing in this story. It is kind of the mystery of who killed Gigi. Everyone in the family is a suspect, and it seems like most people have a motive. One thing I will say about this is, or two things I suppose. YA, as I've said before, I'm not in the age category for reading this, right? And this is on the younger end. This would actually be probably good for kids at the upper end of primary school and just starting high school in terms of young adult fiction, which I think is great because not enough YA is being written for that age category. So I appreciate that a huge amount. But, you know, I'm not the intended author. I'm not the intended target, and I don't generally pick up these books unless I'm sent them now. And two, I'm not the intended target audience for this kind of story either. I'm not upset that I read it. I'm glad that I did because I got to try a new author and I get to support them and all of that. I think the writing is fun. It is very much told kind of in that style of Enola Holmes, in that Ruth breaks the fourth wall. She's talking to the reader all the time. And obviously she's telling the story after the events have happened, so she's signaling throughout every chapter the things that she knows now at the end but doesn't know at the time, and so she's letting us know that things will be revealed in time. So there's that element which is kind of fun and, you know, perfect for this age group. So it's kind of like a contemporary Enola Holmes in that way. There are some pretty ridiculous moments in the story, like the fact that Nick just continuously is injured or sick or something while he's in hospital, and then he finally comes home and again gets injured again. That guy has serious bad luck. But also a series of, you know, little weird coincidences that just prompt Ruth to find out more and to figure out what's going on. And I think one of the other really interesting things about the story is just how complex families are, because this extended family is quite complex. There's a lot of moving parts and it throws up a lot of red herrings, I think that's the term, for who is actually responsible for the murder of Gigi. I'm glad that I finally read it and I get to review it because, you know, thank you to the publisher for sending it me. I will probably end up seeing if our school librarian wants a copy of it for the library, because there are some really strong readers sort of in that very upper primary school level, and we do have sections of books specifically for them because they're avid readers who go through everything. So I'm glad that I finally got to it, and I will be picking up another book for this vlog, hopefully in the next couple of days. Hi everyone, so I'm back with a couple of updates for my review copy vlog. I apologise if you can hear the air conditioner or anything like that. Again, we are going through yet another heat wave. It is March, we need to be cooling down now, but this is Australia and that doesn't always translate. So we've had a really hot day and we've got another really hot day tomorrow, and then really hot days coming up this weekend, which I'm not looking forward to. I have gotten through 2 more books on the list, and by gotten through, one of them was a DNF. And unfortunately, it was a book that I requested for review, which is really disappointing, and that is How to Charm a Nerd by Katherine. Garbera. I don't even really know how to describe it. I got about 50 pages into it, and I kept stopping and starting and stopping and starting and going, okay, just can you push through a little bit more, blah, 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 like, and I just kind of couldn't. So this is a paranormal-ish romance. It is a book in a series, but you definitely don't need to read the rest of the series to pick this one up. That was not my issue with it. There's just something about the writing style that really didn't work for me. And I'm still trying to put my finger on what exactly that was that didn't work. And it's kind of hard. I don't know, I'm finding it hard to put it into words, because I don't want to say the writing style was bad, because there are people who this writing style will work for. I'm just not that audience. It was very much a lot of information being given all at once. And sometimes I complain about not having enough information, but this one was almost like we were getting step by step of what the characters were doing. I could not get into it. And as I said, like I requested this one to review from HarperCollins, and I had every intention of reading it. I just couldn't get through it. And it was actually putting me off reading. So I did sit with it for a bit, and then I've just decided to, I've decided to call it. So there will be an audience for this book out there. It's not really me. So I guess I should probably at least tell you what it's about. So we have Liberty, who is our FMC, and it says she's an occultist and tarot reader, and spooky season is coming up. She likes that season, but she's just found out some information about her biological father, who she's never met, she doesn't know, and she's never really wanted to know, but she's found out this information. She doesn't quite know what to do with it. And she's also got a crush on this guy called Merle, who is the nerd of the title. Yeah, the first part is sort of Liberty trying to decide whether or not she even wants to find out more about this dad that she's never known. And as an opening, that just, it didn't hook me. So sadly, this will be passed on to someone else to read. I'm sure that there's an audience for this. Then I read Red Dust Running by Anita Heiss, which is a book that I had received a NetGalley copy for. I also had the Audible original audio, which I forgot about. So I actually listened to the audio while I was reading the ebook. There's very slight wording differences a couple of times in the book, but there's not that much difference between the two of them. And this one was in the romance section on NetGalley, as well as the women's fiction, and I think just general fiction. Multicultural interest. Because Anita Heiss is an Indigenous woman, and this story is about an Indigenous woman who finds herself in a relationship that she never really predicted finding herself in. And I'm a little bit annoyed that it was in the romance section, because yes, there is an HEA, but the HEA is not between the FMC and the MMC, who the majority of the story is about, which is not to say that the MMC, who the main character ends up with at the end of the book, is not part of the story. He is, but they're not in an actual relationship until the last chapter. And all of their interactions are through our FMC's eyes as a friendship only. I kind of figured that was coming. As I started to read it, I kind of figured that that's where the story was going. So I kind of recentered my expectations on the story. There is a romance. It is closed door, and our FMC Annabelle is a gallery curator, and she is very good at her job, and she's recently just moved back to Brisbane, where she has her very close friends and family, and she's gotten this new job at this new gallery, and she's really wanting to make it work. And then one of her best friends decides that for her birthday weekend she wants to go to a rodeo, and despite the fact that Annabelle has some reservations about rodeos in general in terms of animal cruelty and things like that, she decides to go because it's her best friend's birthday weekend. And then she meets Dusty, who is a black cowboy, and she finds this at odds because the farming in Australia is very much at odds with Indigenous practices. He is an Indigenous man, his family are Indigenous, but they do farm, and so that's a conflict initially, and their entire relationship doesn't work. She's very much a city woman. There is no way she would move to a farm and all of that. So it's very much two opposite worlds colliding, which is how you know that this story does not end up with these two. You can just see it. It's all over the pages. And I think there's some really good realizations on the part of Annabelle throughout the story when she's confronted by the fact that she has tried to change him to suit her, and uses the idea of, well, I tried to make it work when I was trying to fit into your world. And I think that's a really interesting conversation. The book itself, I think it sits firmly in either contemporary fiction with a romance or women's fiction, because the story is about Annabelle. It's not really about the relationships, even though the relationships shape what happens within her story. So, the writing is great. The audiobook is great as well. But yeah, definitely not a romance that I would recommend specifically to romance readers unless you know what you're getting into. But I've mostly read Anita Heiss's nonfiction work, her historical fiction, and also her kids' writing. So this was an interesting change of pace to try it and to really get a feel for what she does in her contemporary kind of fiction, which is what I expected it to be honest. While it's not necessarily something that I would gravitate towards personally all the time, every now and then it's really interesting, and also kind of interesting to hear about rodeo in Australia, because honestly I've never really thought about it, even though I kind of tangentially knew that it existed, but I've never paid any attention to it. So anyway, that's 2 more books ticked off the list, 2 more to go, and I will update you when I get to them. Hi everyone, so it's been a few days and I have an update on some of the review titles that I have, plus also an update on an extra book that I'm going to add to this vlog just because. So I finally read Reaching Through Time by Shauna Bostok. This is her tracing her family's history. So Shauna Bostok is an Indigenous woman, and she is tracing her family history kind of on both sides of her family, but particularly her Indigenous line, and where it intersects with her white ancestry. And it's a really interesting book. It's quite dense at times, which I wasn't expecting, because the first little part that I read, I remember it was really easy to read through. It was really interesting. And the whole book is really interesting because it's someone's family history and how everyone in that family tree interconnects, which is really cool. And Shauna's, interest and search to find out more about her family history led her to a PhD in Aboriginal history, which is also really cool. So it was just kind of fascinating to get a sense of history and Indigenous family and culture through a really personal lens. The book does contain a few photos and bits and pieces that she has managed to collect over time, and talks about the people that she's met along the journey to finding out more about her ancestors. So it's one of those books, if you really like those kind of personal histories, it's a really interesting one. I still maintain I probably would have enjoyed this more if I was listening to it. As far as I know, there's still not an audiobook, and that's just personal preference for me and my reading taste and how I prefer to engage with anything like memoir or personal history. I just find it easier to listen to because when it does get dense, I have a hard time with lots of words on the page. That's a me thing. But no, I'm really glad that I finally read it, because it's been sitting on my TBR for a very long time, since before July 4th, 2023. I have read it now. Sense of accomplishment, and I know a few people who I'll be able to pass this on to because I think they'll be really interested in it. And then today I read Comes the Night by Isobelle Carmody, which is a young adult sci-fi, speculative fiction, fantasy-ish kind of book. It's kind of hard to pinpoint this because it's not a fantasy. It's based in our world, but it's a future world. It is kind of a dystopian type setting. Basically, it takes place in a future Canberra. Most of Australia's cities have been domed because of extreme weather, etc. And we are following Will, who is a teenager. He lives with his dad. His parents are separated. His mother works as the aide to a politician, and she's constantly trying to get him to move to Sydney to do his studies there. But he is caught up in the memories of his uncle who has passed away. And what we find out is that when Will dreams, he tends to have these nightmares. And he's been in therapy for them. But it turns out that these dreams are not just dreams, and that Will has the ability to dream walk. And in this world, which is very tightly controlled because of the domed societies, etc., being a dream walker is potentially dangerous because there are powers out there who want to seek the people who have the ability to dream walk and also to change things in dreams as well, which is a really prevalent theme, and harness that for their own purposes. So in this book, Will, his best friend Enda, and her twin sister Magda end up involved in this plot that is about trying to harness the abilities of dreamwalkers. It was really interesting. I did find it rather slow for me personally. It could be a combination of multiple things. It could be the writing. It also could just be the fact that it's a young adult book and I'm not the intended target audience. And when I comment on the writing, it's not that the writing isn't good. The writing is good. I wanted to read. I wanted to keep going. It's very long. Like, the concept of it is really interesting and really cool. And part of me just goes, I want to know more about what happened to ensure that all the cities are domed. And why are there some cities around the world, including most of the Scandinavian countries, that are not? I want to know that side of the story. That's the part that interests me. Also, all the time that we spend in dreams, I also love that. It's kind of the stuff that's happening in the background, which is kind of like the little mystery plot that's going on that I found, for me, wasn't as personally engaging as the rest of the story. But I think if you are looking for something that has that dystopian, sci-fi, speculative, fantasy-ish kind of spin on it in YA that's a little bit different to everything else that's going on. I mean, Isobelle Carmody is an icon. She's a writing icon here in Australia, so you really can't go wrong. And so even though those were the books that I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm going to tack one book on only because an author reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to review their book. It just so happens that this vlog is going to be going out roughly around the time that the book is released, and I was kind of intrigued by the title and also by the fact that I went and had a look at one of the other books that the author has released and sort of read a bit of the sample of the first chapter just to see if the writing style would gel with me. I mean, that it doesn't mean a huge amount because I haven't started the story yet, so I don't know if that will align for the rest of the book. But the book is called A Gardener's Guide to Love and Loathing, and it's by Chelsea Pennington. So thank you to the author for reaching out. I will be including it in this vlog, so that will be the next and final book that I read and talk about. Hi everyone. So I finished A Gardener's Guide to Love and Loathing by Chelsea Pennington, and this was just a delightful closed-door sapphic romance with a bit of a hate to love, animosity to lovers kind of vibe going for it. Honestly, I just had a very delightful time with it. It is the story of Annie and Jude, who both have a plot in the local community garden. And due to some miscommunication and bits and pieces that went on when they first met a few years earlier, they don't get along at all. Like, they don't even try to get along until someone starts stealing seeds and plants from the community garden, and they also steal tools and whatnot. And Jude and Annie find themselves working together to try and find out who the thief is. Annie is a grad student who is trying to complete her PhD in applied mathematics, but she has had a pretty rough past. Her parents are interesting and not necessarily supportive of her being bisexual and also pursuing something of her own interest. There's always been a really strong pressure for her to go through college and grad school, so she feels that pressure. She was also engaged to a partner who broke up with her because he didn't believe that she would be faithful to him because she'd admitted to him that she was bisexual. So good riddance to rubbish is what we say to that. Jude, on the other hand, manages a local coffee shop, and really the two butt heads because their personalities are very much at odds with one another. Annie is very focused on what it is that she's doing. She likes rules, she likes structure, and she knows that she needs to be doing what she needs to be doing, or she thinks she knows what she should be doing. And then you have Jude, who doesn't really understand why Annie is putting herself through grad school when she obviously doesn't like it. But she does try to be supportive of that, especially when Annie points out that, you know, it's her life, which I do like that. Jude is also a bit of a hothead, so she tends to jump to conclusions, and throughout the book is working on that. And really the big thing in this story is the evolution of both of these characters, who start with prejudged ideas about each other and then end up realizing a lot more about each other as individuals and then coming together. I had a really good time with it. It was a really nice, easy Sunday afternoon read. So thank you again to the author for sending me the review copy, which means that at the end of this vlog, I have read 5 books and DNF'd 1. So How to Charm a Nerd was my DNF. I read Comes the Night, Reaching Through Time, My Family and Other Suspects, Red Dust Running by Anita Heiss, and A Gardener's Guide to Love and Loathing, which is a pretty successful effort in working through my backlist. I will leave a list of all the books that I read down below. In the comments, I'd love to know if you've read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up. Otherwise, feel free to share some things that you have been reading and enjoying recently. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.